We've got a lot of great questions today. The main one is on potatoes. How common were the recipes and what kind of recipes were there being used in Great Britain and North America in the 18th century? Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so here's a great question. This one is how is cheese stored was it at room temperature on a shelf and question mark, okay? And this was from the cheese making video, and there are a number of different ways to store cheeses. Now is she talking about aging cheeses here or just storing them after they're aged? It really depends on the cheese, and there's so many different kinds of cheese and so many different ways they end up becoming aged if it's an aged cheese. Now, sometimes they waxed those cheese to hold that moisture on the inside. Other cheeses are hard cheese and they would stay on those salted shelves, just like in this episode. The cheeses stay on a shelf that stays salted so that they stay good. There are also places where you see cheese is stored in like caves, and they would have mold growing on the outside of them for these long aged cheeses, or even something like a mimolette cheese with the cheese mites growing on the outside of them. There's so many different ways that cheeses are stored. And different ways to age them. So there's a multitude of different answers for this. It really depends on the type of cheese, the culture that this cheese is being made within. So there's a lot of great. Cheese is such a wonderful topic. You really go into depth on it. And even with this episode, she's actually commenting on the cheese making episode just recently, back in June, I think. We were at Genesee Country Village, and we actually cracked open that very cheese that we made that day and ate it. It was wonderful, and that was 6-8 months later. So wonderful cheese. We even got to go through the whole process on that one. This question's on the recent dumpling, the apple dumpling or apple pudding, I guess, apple dumpling episode. Is there an alternative way to do this recipe and others like it without the cloth? Yes, you could just as easily have taken this same apple dumpling and baked it. In fact, that's what most of the modern ones in this sort of, in a modern context, typically we would take that same thing and we would just bake it. And they did that in the 18th century also. It's just that not everyone had an oven in the 18th century, but everyone had the ability to boil these puddings, or in this case, this dumpling. And so that's why we did it in that fashion. That's what the recipe called for, and it's what everyone would have had available to them. And here's one that maybe you can help with. Here's a question on the last episode. My classmates and I are getting ready to go to a local Revolutionary War reenactment, which involves 3 nights of camping and cooking of period correct food. Sounds like a great event. Which period meals or foods would you suggest that are easy yet able to share with others? Great question. And I would start out. Stew is a no-brainer. Everyone has to do a stew. That one's simple, and it's such a common one for the time period, using in so many of these contexts, either a military or a camping situation. Stew is perfect. We've got a great episode on soup, stew, and hash. Any one of those will make a great dish. Let's see, another one, if you want to go and look at the pemmican series, something like rubaboo. Now, you don't necessarily have to start with pemmican. It's also a very similar kind of stew setting. There was another one where we did the spring soup and the Norfolk dumplings. Definitely, that's another one that's simple and really interesting and easy to do. And now is your chance. If you've watched a lot of the episodes or you have some ideas, I'd love for you to chime in the comments section with some other ideas about easy to cook 18th century dishes that would be great to share. We've done a lot of them on the channel. There's probably some other great ones. If you've got suggestions out there, hey, chime in down in the comment section and help this particular viewer out. Here's another question, and this one came in on the asparagus bread. one of the popular episodes from like season 2. I checked out your website and wanted to order a cookbook with some recipes that made my mouth water while I was watching your video, but there isn't a description of what recipes are in the cookbooks. Every time I try to look for a recipe or the recipe in the cookbook description, all I saw was something like a great collection of recipes. Can you put in the cookbook description exactly what recipes so that I know what I'm getting, so I'm getting what I want? Great suggestion, and we will do our best. Although so many of these cookbooks are just chock full of recipes, and so it can be really hard to list all the different recipes that are available in any one particular cookbook. But we'll do our best to, take some of the cookbooks that we've got and list some of the very best ones. But I mean, if the cookbook has, 200 or 300 recipes, it can be really hard to list them specifically. But I do have some suggestions for you. Both the American Cookery Cookbook that's on our website and the Primitive Cookery. I mentioned both of these in this episode. They're both fairly small but chock full of really, really good recipes from the 18th century. They do take a little bit of interpretation sometimes because these are the 18th century cookbook with no help, no modern helps for you. But that's where you'll learn, and that's where you have so much fun. So I want to suggest really checking out some of these 18th century cookbooks. And you can definitely go and check out, we've got a blog that has like a PDF listing of a whole bunch, 30, 40, 50, I don't know how many 18th century cookbooks that are available online in PDF version. They're free to check out, and I'll try to put a link to that PDF or that blog article so that you can check that out if you're interested in digging into these 18th century cookbooks. There's so much to learn. So this question is sort of sparked by the last Q&A. I mentioned potatoes and drying potatoes. This person's got this great question. Potatoes were mentioned, but not discussed. I was wondering if there are any potato recipes, not necessarily just for drying, but in general. Potatoes are a food staple today. Were they less common then? So the question has to do with, were potatoes popular in the 18th century? Did they have potato recipes? We actually have a number of recipes that have potatoes in them, and you can go back and search on some of those. Let's see. One of the interesting ones was a cheesecake episode that had potatoes in it. And some of the stews and the hash, I think, had potatoes with it. That was like first season stuff. Several of the other ones, whenever we use root vegetables, potatoes are, you can put those in, even if they aren't necessarily mentioned. And potatoes were very common in the 18th century. Also, we did an onion pie episode. That has potatoes in it. And here is a section. Here's... this is one of the little cookbooks we sell. It's Primitive Cookery. And this is this collection of recipes in the 18th century that was collected in the 18th century. But you'll find a lot of these out of Hannah Glass and some of the other cookbooks. But let's see. How to dress potatoes. And these goes through several different ways of just dressing potatoes individually. Then there's using potatoes to make potato bread, potato pudding, fried potatoes, potato fritters, potato pie, biscuits of potatoes. So potatoes show up over and over again in these 18th century cookbooks. They were a very common staple, especially for poor people, but not necessarily just poor people in the 18th century. So yeah, potatoes, perfect for 18th century cooking, and you can find a lot of stuff online if you go digging in like a Hannah Glass cookbook. Just you can search individually for potato and find some great recipes. And also, if you go digging in the American Cookery Cookbook, it's got a section on potatoes. She talks about the universal use of potatoes and that you can use them in multiple different ways. And this would be sort of a specific reference to potatoes being used in a North American context here in the late 18th century. Hey, I really want to welcome all the new subscribers. We had a massive upsurge in subscribers in the last 30 days or so, and so I really want to welcome all you new viewers. We have a giant backlog of videos, hundreds of videos there for you to watch, and we also have other sort of resources available online. We have blogs on our website, and you can always find those links down in the description section. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, so if you are, if you enjoy those social networks, make sure to check us out on those places. And I want to thank everyone for their amazing support. Either if you're going to our website and you're purchasing something to help support what we do, or you comment on videos, share your videos, you give us thumbs ups. I mean, the reason why we've had that surge of watching is because you've been sharing videos. So I really want to thank you for what you do, and thanks for watching.